So welcome, everyone. Huge thanks to the organizers. Really honored to be here. Yeah, I really enjoyed Denver so far. It was quite hot yesterday, and today's nice. Cool, so hi, I'm Abby, if we haven't met. So I run open source maintainer programs at GitHub. I've also worked with Mozilla Open Leaders and SustainOSS. So across all of this, I've spent the past decade really thinking about maintainers and how they grow and how we support them. So today I'm going to explore one urgent question: who will maintain the future? Oh, there's so many friendly faces I know in here. Hello, all my friends. Since we're talking about generations, I thought it was apt to include, this is a picture from when I was in university. So I actually learned a hard lesson organizing student clubs, where if you don't recruit freshmen 1 year, 4 years later, your club is really at risk. You have a bit of a leadership gap. So this is me. This is pre-smartphone days. So this is a nice blurry photo that I found on Facebook of me. I couldn't really find very many photos from that time. I was speaking at a student meetup. And part of the movement building training that I went through at that time was really focused on the importance of freshmen or first-year students. I'm Canadian. And that's why it's such critical time to meet them, because sorry, there's so many meetings going on. I can hear. OK. I'm not distracted. Hello, everyone. I'm waking up. Those first few weeks when students are first left their home, this is when they're deciding where they're going to spend their time, who they're going to hang out with, what habits they're going to form. So really that freshman year, those first few weeks of university is when you really want to invite people to your club and get them involved. And then that's how you sort of guarantee that your group will still have leadership 4 years down the road. So I think there's a lot of similarities to that with earlier career developers in the open source space. But it is just a longer timeline, and I think with greater stakes. This is the technological ecosystem at risk this time. So our contributor pipeline's shrinking, and we're not building the next generation fast enough. So I'm sure many of you have seen these graphs from the TideLift 2024 State of the Open Source Maintainer Report. So the graph on the left, you can see that the percentage of maintainers over the age of 46 has doubled since 2021, which graying isn't inherently bad. I do want to say that. It's OK to get older. But it's the lack of succession that's the real threat here. So really, it's that left side of the graph where you see that the contributors under the age of 26 dropped from 25% to just 10% in 2024, which is a huge drop. That's a 60% drop. And yeah, I think we're at risk of really losing the next generation of maintainers. So this isn't just a people problem. It's a risk to critical infrastructure, innovation, and security. Oh, and then the graph on the right shows that 60% of maintainers have either quit or seriously considered quitting. So maintainers are burning out. And this is not a great picture of where we're heading as an ecosystem. So I've taught this framework a few places. With GitHub Maintainer Programs, I've shared it with several hundred projects. Before that, when I was at Mozilla, I worked with colleagues to really develop this framework for the Mozilla Open Leaders program. So it's a leadership development pathway for contributors, from discovering a project to becoming a leader. So any sustainable group needs two things. You need the newcomers to your community, those freshmen or those earlier career developers. And then you need a path to level them up within the community, starting with first hearing about the project to eventually leading the project. So typically, I recommend that projects think up a few personas that represent the diversity of what they want to see in their project, and then map out this path for each kind of persona. And then at the same time, I'll share some just general best practices about open source. But today, I thought it'd be interesting if we think about this Gen Z persona. Who are these early career developers right now? And what does the research say about how they interact with open source and just with media in general? And what can we learn from that? So we're going to meet Sam. So this is Sam. Sam's 23, location urban Canada. I probably should have just written Toronto. I'm from Toronto. Hello. It could have been Vancouver. Sorry, I didn't mean that to be a joke about Canada. Yeah, so Sam wants to make an impact. So Sam there says, I want to contribute to a climate tech project that actually matters. I don't know where to start, but I don't know where to start. I taught myself to code on YouTube. I design and mod online communities. but jumping into a public repo feels intimidating. I want purpose, flexibility, and a place where I feel like I belong. Ooh, I put me belong, that's weird. I'm reading my slides. So yeah, Gen Z in general, so they're born between 1997 and 2012. So the oldest of Gen Z is 27 now. The youngest, I should have figured out math before I sit on here. If they're born 2012, they're like 13 years old now. Yes, that's right. So really, the people that are entering the workforce will all be Gen Z for the next while. And this is the first generation of true digital natives coming online. So with the mountain engagement, I'm just going to talk through these different steps with an overview. So first, there's discovery. How do they first discover the project? First contact. How do they first talk to someone from the project or join a mailing list or go to an event? Participation, would they start making issues, talking in your Discord, going to events? Sustained participation, they keep going to events. They start making pull requests. Networked participation, and when I'm trying to scale a community, this is where I like to focus. When do they start inviting others into the community? When do they bring their friends in? When do they start mentoring new contributors? And then finally, leadership. And that can be everything from running a meetup to running the entire project. So we're going to go through step by step. So first is discovery. So the general best practice that I've always shared for discovery is have that public repository, use an open source license, and then have some sort of marketing depending on who your audience is. Now, if we're thinking about this Gen Z audience, so what does Sam need for this? Sam still needs that public repository and that open source license. We still need those things for people to be able to use it. But that marketing piece shifts a little bit. Historically, I would talk about share it on social media, go talk about it at conferences. But we're finding that Gen Z uses a lot of, we already know that Sam uses YouTube to learn. And the Pew Research Center talks about how 73% of teens say they go on YouTube at least once a day, 57% say they go on TikTok at least once a day, and 59% of Gen Z students cite that YouTube is their preferred way of learning. So if we really want to reach that Gen Z, we need to sort of shift where we're showing up for that marketing piece. And then the other piece there I put is values-driven. Because they're relying so much on their network to share it, Gen Z is sharing things that resonate with their values. So sharing, instead of just explaining technologically why this is a good project, sharing that purpose of the project. And that makes it more likely for Gen Z to be sharing with their network, and then you'll see more of that audience showing up. Historically, I've put this mission piece in the first contact phase, because people will want to do something with you and collaborate with you if they're excited about the mission. But I think with Gen Z, they'll hear about it because of the mission. So next one, now that they've heard about your project, why do they reach out? Why do they actually come in contact with it? So historically, having that clear mission, people want to do something with you, that README, and having good communication channels. It's really disappointing when you go to an open source project and they're like, oh, if you want to help, email me here. It's a little bit tough. But if you have an easy way for people to get in contact with you and communicate, that really helps. Now for Gen Z, leading with that purpose is really important. So yeah, Sam wants that clear mission, but really making that first front and center makes a big difference. And if Sam discovered your project on YouTube, they're probably still going to be on their phone when they're clicking through to learn more about that project. So making sure you're mobile friendly is really important for this audience. I know we often think of developers, they're probably on their laptop. It should be easy for them to figure out what channels to join. But Gen Z is often on their phone, especially if they discovered this on social media. So making it easy for them to join that Discord channel and get involved. They're also very visual. There is this article from the Transactional Journal of Humanities and Social Sciences. It says that 73% of Gen Z participants favored visual and visual-related learning styles. Gen Z has enhanced cognitive abilities in visual learning, with more developed areas responsible for visual processing. So READMEs can be a little tricky. So see what you can do to make that README a bit more visual, or even adapt it. Maybe you can turn that into a 1-minute TikTok. All right, so now that they've reached out to your project, why do they start to participate? So general best practice, personal invitation makes a huge difference. So we know this from volunteerism research. If you personally invite someone to contribute to your project, they can be up to 4 times more likely to contribute than otherwise. So actually inviting Gen Z to contribute can make a big difference. Be responsive. It's really discouraging if someone tries to contribute, then no one's replying. Have like good first issues and clear contribution docs, the contributing guidelines, code of conduct, all that. I think we've heard about that a lot. But for Gen Z, what's been really interesting is seeing more of these sandbox environments. So they like to participate in a space where they can try something without risk of people laughing at them or feeling. So there's this the rise of the cringe culture the past few years. We're laughing. It's a newer phenomenon online where people, like, they don't want to come off as cringe. You don't want to honestly contribute to something but then be made fun of for it. So this has led to a lot more hesitancy in public spaces. So research, Impero research says that 65% of Gen Z feel more confident in community-focused platforms like Discord than in public forums. So if you have a space where it's a little bit more closed so they can feel a bit more comfortable contributing, it makes a difference, and then it will make them more likely to contribute in the true public space. But public spheres, it's a little bit harder for Gen Z on a whole. But yes, SAM thrives in environments that let them try without failure, or fear of failure. So a nice example of this is actually the Kubernetes contributor playground, which is a great way for people to test things out before doing a real contribution. The other thing is they really appreciate real-time feedback systems. So if you have things like those automations with CI bots, Discord responses really quickly, that makes a big difference with Gen Z because they like things to happen immediately, where the pull request system, where you have to make a pull request and wait a while for a response, can be tricky. So you need to pair that with some sort of mentorship or something more immediate. All right, so now they're participating in your project. Why do they keep on participating? So general open source guidance, I say thank them, give them some sort of recognition. Thank you can go a long way. I always talk about connecting what they've done to the mission. So Marshall Gans, he's a political theorist. He shares this example where you have a political campaign and you have a volunteer who's canvassing houses. So say you've canvassed 20 houses that day. You go back to headquarters and then the organizer just takes your clipboard and then like throws it in a pile. You're a little bit discouraged with that. But if the organizer takes your clipboard, says, wow, you did 20 houses, let's add that to the tally board. Then up on the board, they show, here's your 20. Oh, wow, we reached 1,000 houses over everyone. It really connects the tiny bit that they did to that bigger mission. And it makes them much more likely to keep involved and to keep that sustained participation. So wherever you can, connecting that to the mission. And then matching skills and interests. If they want to learn a certain skill, if they want to contribute to a certain space, be receptive to that, and that will keep them involved longer term. Now, what's different for Gen Z? They really value recognition that they can share. So things like badges, I think especially since they're earlier in their career, they want something that they can put on their resume, certifications. So that's really important to Gen Z. They highly value recognition and feedback as key motivators for sustained engagement. Yeah, that's what I have for this. All right. So sustained participation and then network participation. Again, this is the step I think is really important for scaling. If you want your contributors to be inviting others in, to be mentoring others, having formalized mentorship makes a big difference. So inviting people to become a mentor makes them much more likely to onboard others and mentor others. Professional development, we sort of touched on that with sustained development. And then things like hackathons and socials where it's just easier to invite your friends to come. And then for Gen Z, roles at scale. So similar to that formalizing mentorship, things like a Discord mod or community host, those kind of roles Gen Z tends to really care about and gravitate to. And it does help them scale their impact. And they'll invite other people into the space if they have say in how it's shaped. So it's important to bring them in there. And then off-topic channels and informal spaces really matter for relationship building. Common Sense Media says that digital communities that support peer belonging and informal engagement have significantly higher attention among Gen Z. So I know a lot of places already have a little off-topic channel, but Gen Z really appreciates that. Okay, and the last step, leadership. How does someone actually become a leader in the space? Personal invitation. So whether or not it's even if they have to be elected or something, inviting someone to run for leadership can make a big difference. yeah, different ways that you can share responsibilities. You can have that clear governance and value exchange, defining the project governance, I think a general best practices for leadership. But then for Gen Z, a big thing I want to highlight, I think this is encompassed with value exchange, but compensation, I think, is a big deal for them. The Deloitte Gen Z and Millennial survey says that 56% of Gen Z live paycheck to paycheck. And it really affects how much they can contribute to open source. So compensation is just especially important for this generation. Yeah, so here's what I normally share as just like open source best practices. If you're running a project, if you want to get people involved in leadership. But then here's the version now with Gen Z in mind. So yeah, just with that lens, they need, more things like that. And I like this exercise because you can do this with any persona that you want. If you're trying to reach different groups, you can go through and think about it for the different personas. And I think it's a very nice exercise. Okay, so we do have 2 futures here. I didn't know what to put on the slide. But if we continue down the road we're going, this will lead to more burnout, key projects will fail. We're gonna lose that, we'll have that leadership gap eventually when this generation ages out. Now, the alternative, Sam leads a thriving project, mentors others, finds purpose. And which path are we building? How can we bring more of that Gen Z in with our open source? So what can you do? Here are a few takeaways based on what we thought about with Sam. Can you translate your README into a 60-second explainer video? Put that on a YouTube short or TikTok? And I'm so millennial, I don't understand why people would watch that, but Gen Z definitely are doing it. Can you create a sandbox of some sort of first-timer space, some place where they can try things out and start to contribute without that fear of failing, that public fear of failing or being cringe? Start a Discord or an off-topic channel where Gen Z can come and just sort of build that community. And then make your mission loud and visible. Really lead with that purpose. So what does a thriving project look like to Sam? And what would it take for Sam to stay for 5 years and not just 5 weeks? So I just want to leave you with what's one thing you'll do next week. Think about your project and what we've talked about. If you can, write it down. What are you going to do to really bring in this next generation? Because I do think this is something we need to address as an ecosystem as a whole if we want to keep open source thriving longer term. I'll be sharing my slides with all the resources from all the Gen Z research if you want to look at the real numbers. But we have a couple minutes for questions. So I'd love to hear your stories, what's worked for your project, what's been hard. And feel free to reach out after. There's my contact info there. We have 2 minutes for questions. I didn't think I would take this long. Hey, Rebecca,
Thanks, great, really useful presentation. I'm just wondering about a lot of younger people. It's much more attractive to try something new than to take on something that's already established, right?
Yeah.
It's less attractive for a younger person, especially when you're talking about getting CV and compensation and that kind of thing. A lot of young people tend to edge towards the new or the place where, my dad's not.
Yeah.
It's like young people don't want to go on Facebook anymore because their parents are on there.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
Do you have any kind of strategies for how to, almost sell the worth of actually taking something on and growing into something that someone else is already led the way on, or entering a cultural community where people are a little new in leadership positions?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So just for the recording, a lot of the younger generation likes to try something new. Do you have any thoughts on how you can bring them into established projects? And I think what was interesting looking at the research, they do value things like that recognition and the professional development. So if you can make it clear that this will help their careers, I think that's good. Another thing I've always found is even if younger people start their own project, I think that's a great learning experience for them to understand open source and do that experiment where they don't have to fear failure, so that it makes it a little bit easier for them to jump into an established project. They sort of know how it works from one side already. So I still want to encourage that, but those are my 2 thoughts, but I'm sure other people have thoughts. We're at time.
You have to still do.
Oh, I do? Oh my goodness. Thank you, Don. That makes so much more sense. I was like, how did I go through all that? Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah, we'll keep taking questions. I think you are next. Is that David? Wait, no. Mark. Hi, Mark.
So, two questions about the Gen Z path.
Mm-hmm.
One, when you're talking about engagement, is there what's the attitude toward like AI prompt or AI-based code reviews?
Mm-hmm.
Is that seen as cringe or not genuine, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I can't remember the report I was reading. It's one of the ones on here. They do have, oh, actually, it was a Tidelift one. Yeah. They are AI adopters. They're much more likely than older maintainers to use AI, but they also think it's overhyped. So it's a bit of a measured adoption. Because I think as a generation, Gen Z has seen several things fail, like the crypto and metaverse. So they're a bit more skeptical when new things come around. But yeah, they are using AI more than other generations.
Second question, if I may, how cross-cultural are the observations of Gen Z preferences? Do they apply differently in different countries, or do you see pretty universal?
Yeah. The research that I've been looking at has been mostly Western. I'll say mostly urban areas tend to have similar cultures around the world. So I think it applies generally there. But yeah, I can't make broad observations. Yeah.
Thanks.
Stormy?
Yeah, an anecdote to answer your question that supports what you said. There's an open source software startup in Germany that has found great success in getting new maintainers, new contributors to their project by offering to mentor them. So they
Oh, great.
get people that are in university who want to learn how to code and who join the projects to learn and be mentored.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yeah, mentorship, I think people really want that. That's great. Go there. Hello. Yes. Okay. Either one.
Hi, what strategies do you have to keep like Gen Z and younger contributors motivated during the code review process? What I see is new contributors create an MR and are super excited about it and then sort of ghost once.
Yeah.
Can you give feedback?
Yeah. And I keep forgetting to repeat the questions for recording. How do you keep the younger contributors motivated during the code review process? And what I was seeing in the research was like mentorship really helps there. So going back to what we've been talking about, like having someone walk you through what to expect and just be there for the immediate answers can help. And then just having as much CI, just as much automation as you can to give them immediate feedback that could be done, that's helped too. But it is a bit of a culture shift for them, so you do have to walk them through it. Yes?
It's kind of depressing talking about my kids now, but one of the things I'm very aware of for my kids who are 18 and 20 is time boxing, whether it's during their vacations or whether the amount of time they have during the week. How can we sort of work as projects or foundations to be aware of that? And how would you describe that for Gen Z specifically?
Yeah, so let me repeat that to make sure I understood the question. But being aware of time boxing through the week. Is it because they're students or, sorry?
Some people it's because they're students and they
Right.
can't stuff during the week, it has to be vacation. Other people it's, okay, they have time during the week, but they only have a certain amount of time
Right.
they can put aside.
Right. Oh, okay. In that case, that's where I think that casual contributor persona makes a lot of sense. So someone who only has a specific amount of time, maybe regularly, they can help with something like testing releases, like finding those roles that work really well for like that small amounts of engagement on a regular basis. Yeah, that's what I found, but that's more, it's not really specific for Gen Z. Yeah. Okay. Yes, back in the back first.
Coming from the academic side, what can we do to help students learn more about open source and to contribute to these projects from the academic side?
So from the academic side, what can we do to help students learn and contribute to these projects? I think there's several programs out there that do like intro to open source really, really well. And a lot of them have students contributing to real open source projects. So they get that experience and they understand the dynamic and they understand how to work in public. So I think just more hands-on things are great. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so you mentioned that having like a really clear mission or like that kind of like more like moral and guidance kind of project is really useful. How would you do that if you're like working on something that's not that sexy, like development, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do you put a mission on like version 2?
Yeah. Yeah, so how do you put a mission on something that's not that sexy? Oh, no one's asked me that before. I think what I find works is also saying why I contribute to it and why it helps me is a good motivator and can often tie to like my own personal mission. But I don't know if anyone else has thoughts for that. That's a good question. We'll do you. And then, yeah.
Just on that compliment that Jen made, the teams share that, kind of share that chores. The room makes up. The balance that when you get the chance to work through stuff.
So, sorry, those like sharing the chores?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah.
Documentation needs to be, so.
Mm-hmm.
Put aside, put away all the good stuff for a week and clean up the documentation.
Yeah. No, that's a great suggestion. Yeah, so sharing the chores for the recording. Just framing this as it's something that we all need to do and sharing the chores, I think is good. Also, you said Gen Z, and I am Canadian, and maybe I should have been saying Gen Z this whole time. I'm very self-conscious right now. Okay. Xavier.
I think that if you, as a maintainer, think that what you're doing is sexy, and perhaps you can just share that with the hope that someone else will find it also sexy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great suggestion. If you find it sexy to work on it, share why. Yeah, in the back.
So to tie into also the compensation part, pointing out where people might be able to get jobs. I was just working with a project that they had some NVIDIA integration that needed to be done into it, and those students went on to get jobs at NVIDIA.
Yeah.
So pointing stuff out like that.
Yeah, and an NVIDIA job. That's a good reward. Yeah, so pointing out where people can get jobs after contributing open source. I think that's fantastic. Yeah, thanks. You have your hand up?
You mentioned mentoring. Is the ideal mentoring experience for Gen Z?
Good question.
Oh, what is the ideal mentoring experience for Gen Z? I actually don't know. Actually, Phoebe, are you answering this? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They don't like talking. Boy, like they can call them or like they will happily join in if something like a discrete, concrete thing is going to they jump in and they do it. Or they like interact during the student. I would say lead into that.
Lean into Discord. Hands-on work. I think that was a theme I saw a lot in the research. Yeah, thanks, Phoebe. Yeah, here.
As we talk so much about burnout, do you see anything we can do to actually protect or maybe educate the newer generation on that trend so that they're maybe protected as much as possible?
Yeah, so as burnout's coming, like how can we protect this next generation from that? Last year, I actually worked with the GitHub Maintainer community. We ran a series of workshops with several hundred maintainers to put together a guide on like maintaining balance in open source for maintainers. And we, yes, that's on, I didn't include a link on it in this presentation, I probably should have. But I think that's a good resource. I know, probably should make it a TikTok video though, instead of a guide. I'll work on my social media next. But there's definitely a few things around like recognizing burnout and like checking in with yourself and really evaluating that value exchange. Like, are you getting the right amount out of this relationship that you're putting in? And just like protecting your time like that, I think is always what I've guided people to do. Yeah.
Hi, Willie Hauser. I'm curious, with this research, it's a lot of secondhand research. Have you had any opportunities to test either your recommendations on Gen Zs in person or been able to do motivational interviews?
Yeah, I think that would be a great next step. I think a big reason why I wanted to do this secondhand research, like research overview, lit review, is because I kept meeting so many like Gen Z, new to the Gen Zers. What are they called? Gen Zers? Yeah. At things like meetups, and they were asking for advice on how to get involved in open source. So I would love to do that next. Yeah. Yep.
Does the research, I assume it's the second report, does the research talk about why Gen Z has less confidence online? Is it because of examples of abuse, or I'm not sure why? I'm a little puzzled by that.
Yeah, why Gen Z has less confidence online. I do suspect it has to do with being like digital natives and just seeing what happens publicly on the internet and the backlash that can happen. And just now things are cringe if you, but yeah, you can read the research. It might go a little bit more in depth into that. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
I mean, we had a hard time getting students to even want to come to this conference because they didn't want to talk. So, on that side, it's no
Right.
longer, you're just gonna hate, it's not gonna be the primary drive, it's cringe. So, they're just really worried about how others are gonna view them. And it's being in environments surrounded by experts.
Yeah, so yeah, just to repeat for the recording, it's been hard to get students to come to this conference. They're worried about how others are going to view them and just being surrounded by experts. So yeah, what can we do as a conference really to make this more accessible for students? I think it's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned sort of compensation is one thing. I think in my experience, Gen Z is much more like labor rights focused, which is great to see that the future is changing.
Yeah.
But like we've already had a problem with funding maintainership. Sort of how does that tie in with this sort of culture clash of the new generation having to advocate even harder for these typically undervalued positions?
Yeah, and I think that's, so for the recording, we're already having a hard time funding maintainership, like what with the next generation leaning more into this, how are we gonna, deal with that culture clash? I think that's the big problem today, and why open source sustainability is still such a big topic, and why we're trying so many different models to fund open source. So I think that's a great step, like just try these different models, whether it's like accelerators, grassroots campaigns, like setting up your sponsors, try it all. I think the next step is seeing what works for the different kinds of projects, because I don't think it's one size fits all, and then just documenting those best practices. But I'm sure many people in this room have opinions also.
Yeah, can I give something which we found has helped? So I am the Exec Director of Confidential Computing Consortium, which is part of the LF, and we have 14 projects, open source projects as part of us, and we said, well, we will give money to each of these projects to have up to one mentee per year, and we worked with the LF, and they have a program to help with this, and trained the companies and all those sorts of, and the companies who are members were very keen to do this, because even if it's not helping them directly, it's, upping the visibility, getting more people to know about these sorts of things. So thinking about it at that level maybe gives you some different funding models, and it may be, in the end, only 2 of them did it, or 3 of them did it this year, so you weren't going to be spending that much money, but it's a way of encouraging and using other people's resources to put the framework in place.
Yeah, I think that's a great model. So, sorry, for the recording, you can talk to this person. Mike. I think that's, it's a great example of something that works. Yep.
We have some experience around key documents that can help. Many open source projects don't have an overview for beginners. They also don't have getting started documentation that actually works. So one of the key things for someone who inherently doesn't know where to start is they have to get a conceptual overview of the material, and they have to be able to try it. And so if there's an area of focus in terms of documentation, I'd be curious, did any of the research talk about the content that you need to help facilitate this onboarding?
Yeah, and I think this research has been more about Gen Z, but I think for open source best practices, you definitely need that getting started, like your environment, the steps you need to take that. I think that's been trying to think of those best practices have been around for a while. Not off the top of my head can find it. But what was interesting with this is that Gen Z really wants to learn how to do all those things from mediums like YouTube or from like very visual mediums. So it might not necessarily be writing out that documentation, but like visualizing it somehow. All right. So I'm sorry that I thought I ended earlier, so then I rushed through the second half of my presentation, but I'm glad we had this nice long conversation. Sorry I tried to kick you all out 20 minutes early. I'll be around for lunch if you want to chat, and I'll be here for the next few minutes before lunch starts. But huge thanks. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.